complainers complain because they care. If they didn't care, they would just go off to your competitor and never even tell you, which, by the way, is how most people leave a business.
You're listening to the Marketing Study Lab podcast with me, Peter Sumpton, the Lego Master of Marketing, providing you the building blocks you need to be successful with your marketing. This intro lasts about a minute, so feel free to skip forward if you've heard it all before. It's nothing new. So what's this podcast all about? We chat to some amazing people to give you practical advice that you can implement right now that will make your marketing truly awesome. The conversations we have will lead you to the actionable marketing knowledge you've been craving. Just a quick word about supporting the show. The best way to do this is to leave a 5-star Apple Podcast review. It helps me get the best guests and helps others find the podcast. All I want to do is help people get the best out of their marketing. If you've got a burning marketing question right now, let's chat it through. All the links you need to contact me are in the show notes, because let's face it, you ain't writing anything down right now. Now let's get on with introducing our guest. Customer experience is one of those tasks that we all feel should be a number one priority for a company that we are having that experience with. But do we put the same amount of effort into our own business's CX? That is a question I think we all need to ask ourselves. And on this episode, Dan Gingiss, the customer expert coach, is here to help us. He believes that a remarkable customer experience is your best form of marketing. Building on his previous work within 3 Fortune 300 companies, as well as a library of real-life examples, Dan now offers us his expertise in building an amazing customer experience. So in this episode, we cover the main points in Dan's free ebook. The link, as always, is in the show notes. Go and check it out, please. This uncovers 4 things every marketer must know about their customer experience. And during this episode, we cover how we get everyone to focus on the customer experience, the basics for creating a great experience, the digital platforms that could improve these experiences, and the tools and skills we need in the future. But with every positive comes a negative. So Dan, what's the worst customer experience you've ever had?
Great question. And for those that know me, I do not call out brands negatively because I really try to focus on the positive. I feel like there's enough people that already hit on the brands that are doing it wrong. But I will tell you a story, keeping the brand out. I ordered windows for my home a couple of years ago, and we needed something like 35 windows. So this was a pretty big order. And we interviewed about 5 different salespeople. They all came, they all had exactly the same sales pitch. They all noticed that we had cats, and they said, oh, your cats, they're going to be so confused because they're going to see the sun through the window but not feel the heat, and they're not going to know what to do. And everyone told the same story, right? But we found one salesperson that we really liked. It turned out that he worked for one of the companies that was one of the most expensive. I think it might have been the second highest priced of the 5 or 6 we talked to. So the day comes and they're supposed to install 35 windows, and they show up, and it turns out that 4 of the windows are not tempered, and tempered is basically reinforced. You usually need it, at least where I live, by code in some of the lower floors, especially by a backyard. So if the kid's throwing a baseball, if the baseball hits it, it doesn't shatter. So you need tempered windows. Well, they didn't bring tempered windows. So they come and they install 31 out of 34 windows. And that's when it started to get weird, because from a customer perspective, I looked at it as saying, well, my installation's not complete, right? I ordered 35 windows. I only got 31. But the installers, and by the way, the salesperson that we liked, we never heard from again. In fact, I couldn't get the salesperson to even call me back. So now I had to deal with customer service, who sent me to the repairs department, which I thought was very strange because I didn't have anything to repair. I didn't even have the 4 windows that I needed. So I take another day off of work for a repair appointment where they show up with 4 untempered windows. So I have to send them back. I've now taken 2 days off of work in order to be there. The third appointment, they show up, and again, they have untempered
Oh
windows.
no.
Like, it's unbelievable, right? And the fourth appointment, he shows up and I open the door and I could tell by the guy's look on his face. He didn't even say hello. I said, "You don't have tempered windows, do you?" He said, "No, I do not, sir." This was 4 different repair crews or 3 different repair crews that all messed it up. I finally, on the 5th time, 5 days home from work, I finally got the windows installed and never got an apology, never got a follow-up. And what struck me about that experience was this was a very expensive investment, right? This
Hmm.
was not just buying a gallon of milk at the store and coming home and finding it sour. Like, this was a big investment, and especially for a company like that, they depend on referrals, and
Hmm.
I don't think I'm going to be referring them to any of my friends.
Wow, that's unreal. I think we've all got a Windows story that we can relate in some way, shape, or form, particularly if you've gone through that effort of 30 plus Windows being installed. Wow, that's some effort. Fair play. Yeah. No need to name and shame. That's I'm with that. But yeah, that is bad customer experience. Let's move on from there,
Sure.
and move on to take a step back and take a look at your story that brings you to this point in your career. What's that story? And can you explain what you're up to now?
Sure. Well, I have a bit of a different story because I spent most of my career in corporate America before going off on my own. And
Hmm.
sometimes I like to think I did that thing that everybody dreams of doing. And then I realized maybe I'm just the crazy one. I'm not sure. But I spent more than 20 years in corporate America, mostly in marketing and customer experience roles, including 3 Fortune 300 companies. So I spent almost 10 years at Discover Card, which is a major domestic credit card brand in the US. They also own Diners Club around the world. I then spent a few years at Humana, which is a healthcare company, and then McDonald's, which you've probably heard of. So I had a great mixed experience in different industries with different sorts of laws and legal guidelines behind them, different marketing efforts. I led teams ranging from literally direct mail at the beginning of my career through social media and all of the digital channels. Basically, the only marketing channel I've never been involved in is television.
Hmm.
Um, and after a certain amount of time, I started to get bored with the corporate life. I realized that it was really hard to get things done quickly. I wasn't really happy with the pace of innovation. And to be perfectly honest, the thing I wasn't good at in corporate America was the politics. And partly it was because I didn't play it. And I wanted to believe naively that just doing the work and getting results would lead to things. And at some point, I think it led to me hitting a ceiling, and that while I feel like I had a very successful career, I hit that ceiling because I just wasn't real good at the politics. So I had, for several years, been doing stuff on my own. I wrote a book while I was fully employed. I started a podcast while I was fully employed, and did a lot of blogging. And I was realizing that that was the stuff that I really enjoyed doing. And so I tried to figure out how I could do this as a career. I also got a lot of chances to speak when I was in corporate America because a lot of conferences that don't pay their speakers want corporate speakers that have good logos, right? So when I had the McDonald's logo on my card, man, people wanted me to speak so they could say McDonald's was there. And so what was interesting for me is that got me a lot of experience speaking. It got me very comfortable in front of audiences. I got to hone the craft of public speaking, all the while developing my own message that was separate from McDonald's, Discover, and Humana.
Mm.
And so I finally went off on my own at the beginning of January 2019 as a speaker and consultant, and now what I'm calling an experience coach. And it has been a ton of fun. I work from home most of the time when I'm not traveling. I get to work in front of small audiences, big audiences, corporate boardrooms, et cetera. And I get to do what I'm passionate about, which is training people on how a remarkable customer experience can be your very best marketing. So I take all this background that I've had across every marketing channel, and then I basically turn it on its side and say, look, don't do another email campaign, don't do another social campaign, fix your customer experience, and that's going to make all the difference.
Wow, I love that. And that's a great segue onto the main bulk of the podcast, which is looking at some actionable tips on customer experience in marketing and whatnot. And I noticed that you've got an ebook out to help people, and I'd like kind of to focus around that if you don't mind.
Sure.
Um, so what I'd like to do first and foremost is rather than focus on the actual customer experience, it's getting everybody on board. So how do we get everyone to focus on customer experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there was a lot of debate about this when I worked at Discover in particular, because you sort of have two choices. You make customer experience everyone's job, and then it really is no one's job because there's nobody that's leading it and there's nobody that's accountable for it. And let's be honest, when somebody in the working world has 10 things on their goals list, which is too many, let's say they should have five, right? If they have five goals and each of the first four represent, you know, 23%, and then the customer experience represents a tiny little fraction, they're not going to work on it, right? And so that's always a struggle. The flip side is you have a single part of the organization that works on it, and that can be really difficult because the good news is you have accountability, but the bad news is that everybody sort of looks at that team suspiciously, like it's the auditing team, right? Like the team that wants to come in and tell you how you built a bad experience and how to fix it. So it's also difficult to be on this island leading customer experience. And so to me, it has to be a combination. You have to have a culture that starts at the top where everybody feels like they contribute to the customer experience. Even the person in finance that's in charge of issuing out invoices, that's a big part of the customer experience. They may never actually talk to a customer, but those invoices, if you think about it from a customer perspective, when I receive that invoice from a company, that is a major part of the experience. And we can work on that experience, the invoicing experience, and we can figure out ways to make that a remarkable experience. But it does require everyone in the company to understand that, hey, they're there basically for the customer. Without customers, we don't have a business. So the customer, any employee owns that customer, and they have to feel that ownership. At the same time, you have to have some executive that is really taking accountability for customer experience and that is willing to look at the 30,000-foot view of the customer journey. So the entire journey from the beginning to the end, because unfortunately, in many companies, they're built in silos. And
Mm.
so the experiences are built in silos and the customer feels it in silos.
Yeah,
So you have to have that combination, is my opinion.
I love that silo experience. I think a lot of people can relate to that, particularly that work in a corporate culture, corporate company. That the R&D department is not communicating with marketing, that's not communicating with technical, it's not communicating with finance, and also I'd love to get your point, your take on how we get the person that does the invoicing to buy into how important that role is. Like, because some people could see that as a menial role, but it's another touch point. It's a massive, it's of massive value to the customer and the business, obviously, for multiple ways. So how do we highlight that to somebody that might think, well, all I do is invoicing?
Well, I think it comes down to broadly understanding that customer experience is every single touch point that a customer has with your company. And that can take so many different forms, right? It could take a paper form, like in an
Mm.
invoice. It can take a written form in an email. It can take a video form on a TV commercial. It can take an audio form in a telephone call. It could take an in-person form if you have a brick and mortar or a retail. So there's all these different interactions, and from a customer perspective, we add them all up in our head, and that's how we determine how we feel about this company. And
Mm.
so one of the things that I love to teach that I think makes me pretty different is I don't cite any companies that are are targeting to a very high end consumer, because the problem is those companies tend to have a lot more money than the average company. And so, for example, if you think of a super ultra high expensive hotel, right? Of course, you're going to get experiences in a high end hotel that you're not going to get in most hotels. And part of the reason is that they charge more per night and they have more money to spend. And so, spending $100,000 on a customer experience improvement may not be a big deal, but for most companies, that's not happening.
Mm.
And so I try to focus all of the examples that I share on stage and in my consulting are simple, practical, and inexpensive. So to the finance person, what I would do is actually sit down with a marketing person, maybe with the legal department if we have to, and I would try to rewrite that invoice. I would look for words that we use, and almost every company uses it, that are industry jargon or acronyms or things that customers don't understand. I've written two Forbes articles, one about the healthcare industry and one about the financial services industry, both of which use terms every single day that surveys have shown that consumers do not understand. And yet they continue to use these same terms, right? So let's say, I'm going to make it up. Let's say that on your invoice you've got something at the end that many companies have that says net 30. Do you know that your customer understands what net 30 means? I mean, you've always put it on there. It's been on there
Hmm.
since we started business, but do they know what that means? Has anybody ever taken the time to explain it to them? And that's the kind of thing that I look for. And when you think about it, in a printed setting like an invoice, it's free to change it. Like, okay, maybe we have to reprint them if they really are physical, although today so much is digital. It's almost no cost to make a change and to make the experience better. I would also ask that finance person, is there anywhere on the invoice that thanks the person for being a customer, that shows real appreciation? I mean, here's the point where they're paying you money, right? This is
Yeah.
why our business exists. It's okay for us to say thank you, or we really appreciate you. It's actually a really good time to do that, so that as they're writing that check or they're sending the payment, they feel good about doing business with us. So that's why I think even that lowly finance person has a lot to contribute towards customer experience. They just have to think about it in a different way.
I think that could work internally as well from an internal customer experience. If you think about paychecks and things like that, I remember when I was in employment and getting getting a regular paycheck, and then every now and again you get the one line, it said Happy Easter or Happy Christmas or something like that, and it just got me thinking, well, why couldn't they just put a Did you know on there, or some kind of little joke or something like that, just to lighten it up? And I suppose it could work both ways using what you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite stories that I love to tell is a company out of the Philippines called Iflix. They're a competitor to Netflix, an Asian competitor to Netflix. And Iflix has these, at the bottom of corporate emails, there's often that disclosure line that
Yeah.
says, if you're the unintended recipient, you got to delete it and shred it, or we take your first child, whatever it is. So these guys decided to have some fun with that disclosure. And the first three words of the disclosure in bold and in all caps says covering our butts. Now, when you see that, what do you do next? You actually read the disclosure because
Mm.
you want to know what it says. The lawyers are cheering, right? Because the lawyers want you to read the disclosure. Well, the rest of their disclosure is hilarious. And you can tell that it's like a bad joke. A lawyer and a marketer go into a bar, right? Because you can tell that the lawyer and the marketer were sitting next to each other, because the lawyer got all the things he or she wanted. The marketer made it fun. And now you have this disclosure that goes out on every email that gets people to stop, gets them to chuckle, and gets them to say, wow, this is a different kind of company. This is a company I want to do business with. And
Yeah.
how much did that cost them? Zero.
I don't know if you've ever been to Australia or around that location in the world. I cannot remember the airline, but there's an airline, and the video, the instructional video when you get on an airplane, all the
Mhm.
instructions, you get life jacket and things. They've used, I think they used Star Wars characters in one of them. That was it, New Zealand, and they used Lord of the Rings characters.
Yeah. 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 And I
And
think in the US, I think Delta or United used Star Wars. Yeah.
okay, yeah. Just little things like that that, like you say, get the point home, but you can have a little fun with them, and because they're different, people notice and engage.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so and again, that's on our On our podcast, which is called Experience This, we have a segment that we call Required Remarkable. And we talk about the required parts of your business, like invoicing or just legal disclosures or safety videos on an airline. And we talk about how to make them remarkable, how to make them different, right? I just did my own study recently on airline safety videos. I only looked at US airlines.
Mm.
And what I saw was that of the three major airlines, they all covered exactly the same information, and almost in the same words, right? And so when you think about that, and you realize that people who are frequent flyers hear this over and over and over again. And this is so critical information, right? I
Mm.
mean, think about, let's back up for a second and think about if somebody was telling us a few months ago, here's what you need to know about a pandemic, we all would, our eyes would have glazed over. We would have been like, I don't ever need to know about a pandemic, right? Well,
Yeah.
gosh, I wish I was listening, right? It's the same thing. When the plane's going down, you're going to be wishing that you listened to the safety video, right? And yet these videos are often made in a way that doesn't get you to listen.
Mm.
One airline in the US, the first thing, they're the only one of the three, the first thing they tell you in the video is how to fasten your seatbelt. Now, to me, you've already lost me, right? Because I'm already sitting down with my seat already fastened, and you're teaching me how to fasten a seatbelt. So I'm not listening to the rest of it,
Mm.
right? Because I feel like you're talking down to me, and this is not important information. And so all of these required parts of any business, it doesn't matter what business you're in, these are great opportunities to stand out and be different. Invoicing, contracts, welcome letters, onboarding activities, offboarding activities, all of these functions that are sort of required parts of your business are a great time to leave a positive impression on a consumer, because most of the time they're not getting that from other companies.
So I think we've touched on a few points there, but are there any other basics that we could sort of go, right, okay, we can implement these, or elements that we could implement to create a great customer experience?
Well, I think it starts with something that is very basic, which is listening to your customer. Okay. And when I mean listening, I mean being willing to hear your customer, who is going to tell you, if given the opportunity, the things that they love about you and the things that they can't stand about you. And you have to have thick enough skin to listen to both of those things, right? Because the compliments, everybody loves a compliment, right? And everybody loves a pat on the back. And that's good because it tells you what you're doing well and it tells you what you should keep doing. The complaints or the things that they think you're not doing well are harder to take, but they're so much more critical, because I always say that complainers complain because they care. If they
Mm.
didn't care, they would just go off to your competitor and never even tell you, which, by the way, is how most people leave a business. But when they complain, what they're basically saying to you is, I want to do business with you, but you're disappointing me and you're not giving me what I want. But I want to give you a chance to fix it because I want to keep doing business with you. Now, think about that moment and think about the opportunity that you have at that moment. And either you're open to the criticism and willing to think about what it is that's broken and try to resolve it for the customer, or you say, that customer is just a complainer. I'm not going to pay attention to this, which a lot of companies do. And
Hmm.
then what do you think happens to that customer? They pick up and they go to your competitor, right? So, and the best part about that complaint, by the way, is that there's no way that that customer is the only person that has that complaint. So when you fix the underlying problem, you're fixing it for lots of other customers who may be considering going to your competitor as well. So to me, the number one thing is you have to have a robust listening program. You have to listen, and that is not just surveys. Surveys are fine, but you have to proactively listen. And the very best place in the world to do that is social media, because it is the largest lab. It is unfiltered, and you can hear what people are saying about you, your competitor, your industry, other industries, other companies, and it's all unfiltered. And if you have this, you need some software to be able to digest it all, especially in Twitter. But that is the single best way to learn what you're doing well, what you need to improve upon. I've seen lots of companies come up with new products just based on listening to how customers use their existing products. One of my favorite brands, which I actually use myself is Otterbox, the phone case company,
Okay.
and Otterbox actually through social listening learned that people were taking their phones into before the phones became waterproof, were taking them into the shower to listen to music. And they had never thought of that use case, and so they went back to their R&D department and they built their first ever waterproof case, which became one of their best sellers. And that was simply because they were listening.
I absolutely love the fact that, and we all know it, or we should know it, the fact that all these negatives, the comments that we get, they should be seen as positives. Like, I just love the way you put it, in the fact that you're saying that if people are really narked with you and don't want to do business with you, they'll just go away. But if they want to, they'll complain. And it's literally, they're saying, look, I want to help you as a business succeed. Please listen to me. Even if they wrote that, I don't think some businesses would still listen to what they were saying. They'd be like, oh, just a complainer, get rid of them.
Or people believe that, the way we built it was, the customer doesn't really know what they want. We know what the customer wants, and we
Yep.
built it that way. And we have the best programmers and the best designers. And so, because admittedly, the folks at Apple sort of have been known to say that, right? That nobody knew that they needed an iPhone until Apple told us we needed iPhones, right? And yes, there are some extraordinary cases like that, but in most cases, your customers, especially your loyal ones, know your business so well
Mm,
that they want to share. And the other thing is, this is, I think, has started from the millennial generation. I think really popularized this, is that today's consumers want to have a relationship with the companies that they do business with. And in the past, we didn't really have a mechanism for that, right? I love to tell the joke whenever I go to train or speak to a contact center employees. I love to tell the joke about how, no contact center employee ever has picked up the phone and on the other line somebody said, "I'm just calling to tell you how great of a job you're doing." Right? That's never happened in the history of customer service. And yet it happens every single day on Twitter and Facebook. Every day, millions of times, people go on to social media to compliment brands and to talk about positive experiences that they have.
mm,
And what's funny is, one of the things I teach is companies were not prepared for that. They weren't prepared. So whose job is it to answer the person who's complimenting you? We've never had a person on staff to do that because it's never come up, right? And now all of a sudden you have people in social media that are complimenting you. Well, is it customer service? Is it marketing? Who should talk to these people? And unfortunately, what's happened with a lot of companies is no one talks to them. And I say, this is a huge opportunity. Here's a person who loves your brand so much, they're going to risk their own social capital to go online and in public compliment you. And you're going to ignore them? Like, you can't do that. When if I get off stage and somebody says, "Wow, that was an awesome presentation. That was my favorite one of the whole event." And I just walk on and don't say anything. Like, you can't do that. Right. And so, but that's another piece, is that the world has changed in terms of how
mm,
people want to interact. And what just a brand getting back to somebody and saying, "Hey, we love you too," or even if you don't have time to do that, just like the post, you will make someone's day. Wow, giant brand X liked my post, I feel
hmm
like I'm, number one. And it makes such a difference, and it really, really pushes that loyalty button in people. And that's what we're all trying to get at, right? We're trying to get and keep loyal customers.
I love the fact that it could be the C-suite executive CEO, or whatever, and someone phones them up and says, sorry to bother you, but we've just had a customer phone us and say that we're doing a great job. What do you
Right.
want us to do?"
Yeah, well, what should we say? We've never had this happen. Yeah, and look, I give all the credit in the world to contact center employees because they do spend most of their day dealing with
Mm,
unhappy customers. It's a very, very tough job, and actually, that's one of the reasons why I recommend to companies that you let your customer service agents handle the compliments, because it will actually make them better agents when they have to handle complainers. Because if you think about their day, right? I mean, the old phone agent, of course, but even the digital agents, all day they're dealing with people that are angry, that are frustrated,
mm,
that are complaining. I mean, that has got to be exhausting. Wouldn't it be nice if somewhere during the day they got to deal with somebody who was happy and who was complimenting you, right? And I think that's a nice change of pace. And I think it probably makes them more patient for the people that do have genuine complaints. Because again, if all you're doing, can you imagine sitting there at that desk? Every time the phone rings, you know it's an angry person, and yet your job is to pick it up and talk to them, right? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that sounds difficult to me. But it'd be really nice if in between there I got to talk to somebody who was happy and who gave me a compliment and who talked about how much they loved the company. So when social first came out, the marketing team smartly decided, well, we want the positive comments. We're going to call that community management. And then we want customer service to take care of all of the complaints. And I suggest that that's not the right answer, that you should have customer service agents are the ones that are trained to talk to customers. Marketers are not trained to talk one-on-one to customers, and service agents know how to do that. Plus, I think it makes that job a lot more palatable.
That leads us nicely on to the next question, or next part of this chat, and that's what digital platforms can we or should we be using to improve our customer experience? I suppose it depends what industry and business, but in general.
Yeah, and similar to not knocking brands when they're negative, I don't like to play favorites on the platforms, but I will definitely give you some overview.
Hmm.
Um, as I said before, for sure, you need a listening platform. There is simply too much out in social media for you to digest that by yourself. Even if you're a small company, I would ask you to be looking at your industry, to be looking at your competitors. And once you start to open up that space, it's a lot to be listening to. So
Hmm.
there's lots of great platforms out there for social listening. Maybe you don't need all the bells and whistles of the analytics, but you just want to know what's going out there and see it in a easy to digest chart, and there's plenty of companies that can do that. I think that in social media in particular, and I write about this pretty thoroughly in my book, is that you need a platform to siphon in all of the incoming messages, and to help you prioritize them. And if you have a contact center with more than more than one agent handling social media, to be able to allocate it to the right agents, et cetera. And that again is very, very difficult to do manually or just in the native Facebook or Twitter platforms. So I think some software there to help. And then I think the other thing is that you need something that, as we were mentioning before, allows you to see the entire customer journey. And I like the concept of journey mapping, and you definitely can hire consultants like me, or you can buy software programs that'll help you journey map. But the challenge with drawing up a journey map in on a whiteboard or on a in a conference room is the one person that you need the most is missing from that conversation, and it's the customer.
Yeah.
And so what I prefer to just drawing journey maps on boards is to is a couple of things. Number one is to become your own customer. And this doesn't take any, this is, I'm veering a little bit off because this is not a software or a platform,
Hmm.
but becoming your own customer is the best way to understand how your customers feel. And number two is sometimes that's not possible, especially in a B2B space. And so in that case, I suggest that you attach yourself to the hip, at the hip, with a customer, so that you're basically following them along the path. And then when you get to your journey mapping, or when you're able to look at your customer experience from a 30,000-foot view, you really have a sense for the emotions that are attached to each step of the way. You have a sense for the silos and when a customer feels those silos. I just went from the sales team to the installation team of my windows, right? Which means the salesperson's never talking to me again. And I mean, as a customer, I feel that, right? And that is because of a siloed structure. And there's not necessarily a software platform that's going to tell you that. And so I do think that's a really critical piece. And then, of course, I think the last piece is that anything that you are running digitally, and any of the platforms that you're already using digitally, say to run your website or your mobile app. This gets back to the listening piece, but you have to use the analytics that come with that to understand what the journey is like.
Hmm.
If you get to a page on a website where people are spending an inordinate amount of time, and it's not a page where they should be spending a lot of time, you could probably make some assumptions that something's confusing them, that something is not as easy as it should be. And that's the kind of ways that that you can use to to eliminate friction in the experience, which is one of the best ways to take it from ordinary to extraordinary.
And just staying on that final point that you made about dwell time, I suppose we could call it, or stickiness. You could, if you were just looking at the pure numbers, you could be blindsided by the fact that somebody's staying on our page. This is amazing, fantastic. We want them on the website. But really, everyone's getting to that point and being so frustrated, spending 3 or 4 minutes and then leaving. So like you said, attach yourself to the customer or be the customer, because you'll never see that from the numbers and figures that you're looking at.
Yeah, and if I can, I want to give you a quick story on this
Sure.
that actually it uses that same dwell time, but in the exact reverse. So when I was at Discover Card, one of the things that we noticed was that basically the top reason people came to the website was to look at their most recent transactions. People wanted to make sure that, the restaurant didn't overcharge them for the tip or whatever it was. So they wanted to see their last 5 transactions. Well, at the time, we were making it too difficult to get to those. You had to log in with your name and password. You got to this landing page. You had to go find transactions at the top navigation, and then it was a drop down, and then you had to select something. And basically 3 clicks, 4 clicks to get to your transactions. So one of the changes that we made, this was very early on, and so at the time I think it was very forward thinking, is we built what was in essence, we took a page out of Facebook's book. We built a feed on the homepage, and the feed was your most recent 10 transactions. And then something extraordinary happened. All of a sudden, all the metrics changed, and what we found was that the average customer was logging in, spending less than a minute on our site, and then logging off. Now, to Amazon, they would call that bounce rate and they would say, this is horrible. The house is on fire. But to us, we said, holy cow, we just gave them exactly what they wanted, because nobody wants to spend more time than they have to on their credit card website. They want to come in, get their work done, and leave. And we saw an enormous number of customers. Basically, our bounce rate went through the roof. But you know what else went through the roof? Our customer satisfaction scores, because we gave people exactly what they wanted. And we were willing to look at the bounce rate statistic, or the dwell rate, the opposite of dwell rate. And we were able to look at it a different way to say, well, what if they spent less time with us? Because that's probably what they want, right? And that's exactly what they want.
Yeah. Again, looking at different numbers and figures, not presuming you know what the customers want or that you've got it right. I love that story. Fantastic. So looking towards the future then, what tools or even skills do we need to create good customer experience?
Well, I think that one of the skills is hard to teach, but I do think culturally we can change it. And it is really, the best compliment I ever got from a boss was one of my bosses told me that he liked the fact that in every meeting I was always wearing the customer's hat. I was always thinking about the business problem from the customer's perspective. I didn't even know I was doing it, to be honest. It just sort of was natural to me. But that to me is one of the changes that every company has to make. And you got to make this really with every employee, right? What am I doing? I got 10 things on my to-do list. How are these 10 things affecting the customer? And is it making the experience better? Or am I creating more friction for the customer? Am I making it harder for the customer? Are we adding, let's beat on the airlines a little bit more. All of the nuisance fees that airlines came up with, that basically I imagine it was some guy in finance that said, well, I know a way that we can make a couple $1 billion. Let's charge people to check their bags, and it's like, well, great, except you just pissed off all of your customers in doing that. And sure, over time we all got used to paying for our bags, and so that finance guy is probably now the CEO. But I do think that wearing that customer hat and understanding the business decisions that we make and thinking them through from a customer's point of view causes us to make better business decisions. And I think there are companies that do that very, very well. One airline that I think continues to lead the pack, at least in the US, is Delta. And I'll give you an example. We're right now, as we record this, we're still on lockdown in the COVID-19 pandemic. And Delta realized that their most frequent flyers, their most valuable customers, were probably worried about maintaining their elite status because they couldn't fly. And so they came out and they said, you get to keep your elite status for an extra year, no matter how much you fly this year. Oh my gosh, the people that are loyal to Delta are never flying another airline again.
Hmm.
Right now, does that cost them some money? Yeah, it probably does. But the whole idea was that it was a policy that was, if they wanted to be strict about their policy, even through a pandemic, which is a big mistake, um, they did so with a big risk of annoying their very best customers.
Mm.
And instead, they took a step back and they said, "Well, how can we please our very best customers? How can we make our very best customers tell people about us and brag about us and be so confident in their decision to fly with us?" And they came up with that, and I think the other airlines will follow them, but it won't be as impactful because the other airlines aren't, they weren't the first one out to think of it. They were just the followers. So that's my long-winded answer for you.
Sure, no, that's excellent. I got a similar email from a hotel group as well, saying that loyalty points won't be affected because you need to use them in a year's time or something like that. Anyway, but it's like you just said there. What Delta have done, they've looked at the very short term and also the very long term. Like you said, they'll probably take a hit, but in the long term, the loyalty, customer lifetime, etc., that will be exponential on their balance sheet, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love to talk about is the leaky bucket. And most companies don't realize they have a leaky bucket, but pretty much every company does. These are the
Hmm.
people that are leaving your business every day, likely to go to a competitor. And the problem is that almost every company is so focused on getting new customers that they're forgetting about the customers that are actually paying the bills and the ones especially that are leaving them every day. And so I always say that's why I say that a remarkable customer experience can be your best marketing. If you stop for just a minute, if you stop trying to get new customers and you spend some time trying to keep the ones you have, you are going to have a huge impact on your business. You
Mm.
probably, most people have seen the Bain statistic that says that a 5% increase in retention can lead to up to a 95% increase in profit
Wow.
just by 5%, stopping 5% of that bucket from leaking. So it's a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Okay. So, Dan, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I am ready for some quick fire questions.
Brilliant. What's that source of info you just can't live without?
Most recently, it's been my friend. I have to spell her, otherwise she's going to turn on. It's Alexa, because every day, every morning when I wake up, I have her read the news to me, and right now that's been the thing that I can't live without is hearing the news every day.
Yeah, it won't be long before even spelling that name out.
Will
The
probably cause her to wake
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Yes,
Did you mean to call me?
exactly.
uh, what was the last thing you remember googling?
Last night, I made, for the first time in my life, I made a fish recipe with orange roughy. I had never purchased orange
Mm.
roughy in my life, so I didn't know how to cook it. So I Googled a recipe and it was delicious.
Oh, nice one. I like it. A lot of home cooking being done at the moment, I guess.
I do love to cook and I don't often have time, and that has
Yeah,
been one of the benefits.
that's cool. If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Well, I'm going to have to give you a bit of an American example here,
Okay.
but I grew up as a diehard Chicago Cubs fan. That is one of the reasons I'm probably as loyal as I am, because rooting for a team that didn't win for 108 years really sows loyalty into your soul.
Yeah.
And so I would have told my 10-year-old self, don't worry, they're going to win it all in your lifetime.
Is that the curse of the goat?
That is,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I'm a Liverpool fan,
Uh huh.
and we were about to win the Premier League for the first time in 30 years. And then COVID-19 did us
Oh,
stop that.
man.
2 games away. 2 games away.
So unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not 108 years, though. What's the most important thing to know about marketing right now?
Wow, that's a tough one. I'm going to say that it is for most companies, unless you are Starbucks or Coca Cola, for most companies, people don't want your marketing. And that's the biggest, if you can understand that, it will change how you market.
Hmm.
Right? Is so many companies think, well, we've got the best thing in the world and everybody wants to hear about it. No, no one wants to hear your marketing. We just want to scroll through our Facebook feed and not be interrupted. Right? So so I always told people, and it helped that I worked in financial services and healthcare, which really are industries that people love to hate.
Mm.
I would always tell my teams, guys, no one wakes up in the morning wanting to hear from their credit card company or their health insurer. Just get that through your head and we can be better marketers, right? Because now if we understand that and appreciate that, then the way we communicate with people will change. So I would say, unless again, you're working for a company or Disney or somebody that, no, everybody loves,
Mm.
for the most part, no one wants to see your marketing. And if you just accept that, you'll become a better marketer.
That's great. On a marketing podcast, that's really good to hear.
I know it's tough to say. I understand I'm a little contrarian there, but like that's the truth. I mean, again, I'm thinking from a customer hat, right? Do I like when the commercials come on TV? No, I fast forward through them, right? Do I like when my favorite podcast is interrupted by an ad? No. So no one likes marketing except for marketers. And that's and I am a marketer, so I get it, but that's one of the tricks I think to becoming a really good marketer is just understanding, hey, we got to do this in a way that doesn't annoy people and that doesn't and with the knowledge that they don't really want to hear our message. And so that now if we approach it with that, we're going to come up with something that is more creative. No one wants to read a disclosure either until you start it with the words covering our butts. Then everybody wants to read it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
Absolutely. So just on that point, there's he's an ex-professor now, but a guy called Mark Ritson in the UK. He's a well-known marketer, and he's pushing at the moment to say that look, promotion is just one of those 4 Ps that we need to be focused on as a marketer. And a lot of companies have communication departments rather than marketing departments. They just don't know it. And marketing have been pushed out of the product, the price, and the place. And it's exactly what you were saying. If you think about the place and the distribution and the comms that we have throughout that distribution network, hugely effective, but instead we're focused on that promotion, that sponsorship, that get in somebody's face, which in turn really ruins the customer experience.
Yeah, and just so you know that I practice what I preach on my podcast. One of the first decisions my co-host and I made was we are not going to do commercial reads, no matter how much somebody pays us, because we hate listening to commercial reads, right? And we have a show about experience, so wouldn't that be backwards if we did that? And so our sponsorships are integrative. We co-create content together. It's very subtle. It doesn't feel like you're being sold to, and our sponsors love it. And our audience loves it because we're giving them content that is actually useful to them rather than a commercial. So I do practice what I preach. I don't just tell people to do stuff and then go accept a contract so I read a commercial on my podcast. We won't do that.
So Dan, final and most important question. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Sure. Well, you can find me at my website, which is dangingiss.com, and Gingiss is Gingiss. I'm also very active on Twitter, which is at dgingiss. Happy to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. And I have a podcast every week called Experience This that's on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And I'm also doing a live LinkedIn show on Thursdays. It's a little bit late in the UK. It's going to be evening time for you, about 4 p.m. Eastern, where I interview people who are experience makers, who are creating experiences at their companies, and try to learn from them as well.
Brilliant. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Loved it. Fantastic.
Well, thank you, Peter. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks once again, Dan, for being such an amazing guest. Really enjoyed that talk through of how to improve our customer experiences. And as always, just time for some quick takeaways that I learned from that really enthralling chat with Dan. I hope you agree. It was a super episode. So the first one is that complainers complain because they care. Never thought of it like that before. But listening to your customers is so vital because of this. The ones that provide feedback and are complaining are the ones that want you to succeed. They want you to get better and improve on what you've already built. They're not trying to knock you down. They're trying to help you, so listen to them. The second point is that someone has to be accountable for customer experience. Although everyone in a company should be involved in it and feel like they are part of it. Dan gave the example of invoicing and how this can be an important part of the customer experience overall, because it's a vital component in that journey. You're asking somebody to give you money. Most companies would flippantly pass this off as a basic admin task. But how do you integrate this into a valuable customer experience for those customers that have already decided that you are worthy of solving their problem? And finally, think about and remember all the touch points your customer has with your organization and make these memorable and true to your brand. As Dan stated, they don't have to be expensive. Some of the best experiences are brought about through simple, practical, and inexpensive changes. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.